Welcome to the Pop Docs channel. My name is Joseph, one half of the Pop Docs, back with another Wheel of Time video. And joining me for this particular video is the other half of the Pop Docs, my sister Denny. Denny, how are you doing today?
Hello, I am doing fantastic.
Excellent, excellent. Today, in this video, we are talking episode 4 of season 2 of the Wheel of Time, Daughter of the Night. Ooh, which is very Halloween as sounding title, which is somewhat apropos even though it is September. But Halloween product is in store, so it's basically Halloween season in my view. That is a complete tangent. Let's get back on track here. Get myself back on track. As we have done with our other 3 videos where we have talked about the first 3 episodes of the season, we are going to be talking about our thoughts, our reactions, our review of episode 4 in spoilery detail. We're going to talk about each individual storyline, what we liked, what we may not have liked, what we hope to see potentially going forward, as we are now officially halfway through this season of the Wheel of Time. Hard to believe. They're already at the halfway point.
We waited so long for this, and now it's just flying by.
Yeah. We are at 90 degrees. Wait, no, 180 degrees.
80.
I know circles.
Yeah,
I know circles. I know circles. Not well. But anyway, we are talking in spoilery detail for certainly the show, first season, these first 4 episodes. Our reaction review, our discussion of the first 3 episodes you can find on our channel for those interested and have not seen it already. But we are also able, if we want to talk about spoilers for the first 3 books. The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, Dragon Reborn, because as we understand it, those are the 3 books which are being adapted in the first 2 seasons, with The Great Hunt, Dragon Reborn essentially being the framework for this season. So with that, Denny, is there a particular storyline that you would like to start off with in this video?
I mean, the best one in my opinion was obviously the Lanfear storyline.
All right. Do you want to save it for the end then? Or do you want to start with it? You want to start on a high note or end on a high note?
Let's end on a high note.
Okay.
Because the ending was my favorite part, which is part of that storyline. So let's end on a high note, and let's start with the others.
Okay. Then I'll pick one out of that. We'll start with the quick ones, which is a quibble, if not a concern I have. But let's start with Matt, which I think is the quickest storyline. This is the Matt and Min storyline, it's the Min storyline in this episode.
Yeah.
But they are seemingly on the road. We're not sure. They're in a tavern of some sort. We don't know if they're still in Tar-Valon or if they've made it outside of Tar-Valon. Because last time we saw them, they were saddling horses and about to presumably leave Tar-Valon, 2 parts unknown. And we found out Min is being directed by Leandrin for some presumably nefarious purpose, we imagine, even though Min, clearly according to this episode, doesn't have the full understanding of what she's wrapped up in. Because we meet Matt and Min in this tavern drinking and dicing. My recollection is Matt is still losing at dice, so his luck has not kicked in yet. His Tavernness and his Tavernan powers seemingly have not kicked in yet. And they have a little bit of banter. I think it's pretty good banter. But essentially, Matt says, "You're funding our trip, and I think you should get us a room." She says, "I'll get 2 rooms." And so she goes up to the barkeep, the tavern owner, the innkeeper, and it's clear they know each other, or they're at least aware of each other, because Min tells the innkeeper, "I need the attic because I'm meeting somebody, and when that person comes, they'll ask for me and send them up." So it appears, at least in my view, my interpretation was the innkeeper is also working for Leandrin, or is wrapped up in this conspiracy that clearly involves Matt. And so the next time we see them, that's all we see of Matt, by the way, in this episode. The next time we re-encounter this storyline in the episode, Min seemingly is awakened in the attic, and then she's rushed off by her 2 aunts to essentially be a circus attraction or a carnival attraction, a fortune teller, which presumably is telling us a little bit about her past and where she came from and how she was treated by her aunts. And it turns out she's dreaming. And apparently the X-ray or whatever they call it on Amazon, it does say that this is in Teleronriad. So this is in the dream world. Because we do see a couple random people come in to get their fortunes read, their futures read by Min. And then all of a sudden, in walks Ashamael. And yeah, another great scene by Ferris. Ferris playing Ashamael.
It's fantastic.
And he reveals who he is to Min. And she's understandably concerned about this. I would imagine she could have been a little more concerned, considering a Forsaken just stopped by and was talking to her. But it's okay. She was concerned, so okay, whatever. And she pushes back, doesn't want anything to do with this now that she knows the Forsaken's involved. And clearly, Leandrin is a dark friend. Presumably, she's under the command of Shamael. And Shamael basically tells her, get Matt to Carien, and I'll get rid of your fortune-telling abilities, your visions. Isn't that what you always wanted? And so here's the devil's bargain. Basically, sell your soul to me and do what I want, and I'll free you of what you believe is a burden. And I think it's really trippy, the way they shot it, because the camera gets like kind of edited in multiple different ways as it's panning from different angles on Shamael's face as they're going through this. And so there is kind of a trippy, surreal element to it, which I thought was a good touch since it's in Teleronrad. But I believe it essentially ends with what we assume Min accepting her fate and deciding to take Matt to Carien in order to, at the back end of this, have her visions removed from her. Did I miss anything from the end of that storyline? That was my recollection, essentially, of what happened in that storyline.
No, I think that was basically the general gist of it.
So, your thoughts on it?
I mean, it was quick, and I kind of like the subtlety of not including a lot of Matt, but it still was about Matt, really, because ultimately Ishmael wants him to get to Carien. So I like that, and I loved the way they shot that scene between Ishmael and Min, and how they made it feel so trippy. I love a good, like, straight to camera kind of creepy vibe shot with like a villain. I always think it's so creepy because it feels like they're staring into your soul. And so I actually really love that part of it, and I liked that you kind of got a sense that it was like in another kind of dream world because the editing really sold it to me. And also just, really creepy how Ishmael can control in that world. So I thought it was well done in showing his character and kind of moving the needle in the direction of Matt, going to where he needs to be.
And so what do you think's going to happen here? Assuming they get to Carien.
Well, gosh, I hope it's, kind of along the same lines as the book storyline, hopefully. But I'm not entirely sure. It's like, I don't want to say anything because then it's probably just going to be completely different.
Well, I think they're leading up to a version of the party at Barthanes' Manor from the Great Hunt. Because we find this out, we'll talk about this in more detail when we get to Moraine's storyline. Is Moraine's nephew is apparently betrothed to the Queen of Carien.
Yeah.
And presumably, the Queen, getting all these people mixed up. Moraine's nephew presumably is Barthanes. And so it seems like what they're doing is they're still going to have that sequence from the books, just in a slightly different context.
Sure.
And in that sequence, my recollection was Matt was there with Rand. And like Rand was the Lord, was playing the role of the Lord, and then Matt was Rand's servant. And that allowed Matt to then investigate the manor and look for... I forget exactly what they were looking for. I think he was looking for his dagger at the time. I mean, he was looking for the horn, because I think my recollection now is I think they tracked Pat and Fane there. And so he was part of like the contingent that were tasked with looking for the horn, I believe. And then he was also looking for the dagger. So I think that's ultimately where they're going, I hope. If only to give Matt something to do, because they just don't seem to know what to do with Matt. And...
Well, essentially they eliminated the dagger early on, basically. And so that's what kind of kept him pulling.
Relevant?
Because Pat and Fane had it in the books, too, along with the horn, right? And so...
But we are presumably going to see him with the dagger again, because there was that quick shot in one of the trailers of him sitting at a table with the dagger in front of him. So I think they're bringing it back. But it's just... I assume their argument would be, well, we're still trying to figure out how to reincorporate Matt because of the changes we had to make due to Barney Harris leaving in the first season.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, maybe, but we're 4 hours in. Really, you can't. And we'll get to this maybe next, because my least favorite storyline is the Lan and Alana and her warders storyline. Cut that way down in time and give it to Matt or Perrin or somebody else.
Barely in half. just like a
Yeah.
lot. Just
Because
kinda
I don't
a
see
lot.
why you can't have, why you just have this one quick shot, basically, or quick scene of Matt in a tavern. Actually, maybe show them traveling around, both Min and Matt. Or maybe meeting Bail Doman and going down the river to Carian. Maybe that happens in the next episode. I don't know. But it just seems like the allocation of time for these storylines, to me, is not well allocated, in my view.
Right.
And that certainly is coming from a book reader perspective, because I do wonder how non-book readers feel about this, because they don't have any real connection to Matt. And they might have, because the show spent so much time on, say, Alana and her warders, they might have more of a connection to the warders. But either way, I just feel like I'm disappointed so far in the way that they've largely ignored Matt. And especially if they're going to keep with the way the Great Hunt ended in the show.
True.
Because if you don't spend enough time setting that up, then I think non-book readers will be disappointed. Like, why did he get to do that when we barely know this guy? Plus, he's a horrible human being, because the last time we basically saw him, he wouldn't console or comfort Egwene, who was presumably her friend. So,
True. You just abandoned her.
just like he abandoned them in the first season. I mean, he's a horrible person, and that's all they've really shown. And I don't think it's helped that he also left his cell before freeing Min. That's still... So I don't know. That's my big concern. The small thing, and I'm reserving judgment to this, is it's another example of like a Shamael essentially having one of the Taverin in his clutches and just not killing them. So I go back to my argument I offered in the last video on episode 3 about this, and I hope that's kind of the way they're trending. Otherwise, it just seems ridiculous to me that he is not doing anything really to deal with these Taverin. So, whatever. Yeah. But I agree with you. The way they shot Teleronrad was really cool. Oof. And I'm glad that they are incorporating Teleronrad into the show. Because I think I think they're doing a good job considering how difficult it can be.
Yeah, considering we haven't got the Mirror Worlds, haven't even seen the Ways yet, again.
Yeah, they're coming though. The Ways are clearly coming, because they showed the way gates in the trailer.
I can only hope that they show it again. I want some more Ways.
I mean, they have to. They got to get to foam somehow. And they're not going to be... I can't imagine them doing 6 months later as they've traveled by horse across... Yeah. I could see them, doing some... As we talked about, I can't remember which one it was, the video we did, but talking about Mirror Worlds. I could see them doing flicker, but using waygates as opposed to the Portal Stone. And my recollection was in that, like a whole season went by with the flicker scene.
Yeah.
So I could see them doing something still like that. Don't think it resolves the issue with Rand not knowing how to use a sword yet fighting Turok at some point, but whatever. Yeah, that concern has only increased with the end of this episode that we'll get to. But
sure,
let's move on to, since I alluded to it, the Lan storyline. He apparently is now in the hometown of Alana.
And he's wearing his hair down.
His hair's still down, just like in Nynaeve's accepted test. And they had that, I thought it was a cool transition how they went, I believe, from a Nynaeve scene that we haven't talked about yet to Lan with his hair down. So it almost looked like, or it seemed like they were referring back to the accepted test, almost like it was a memory of her in the test.
Yeah.
And
at first I thought it was.
I did too.
I was
I was like, oh my God, okay, they're going back to it. Yeah.
Or something.
Which I thought would have been a cool scene if they had done it that way. But it just turned out it was just kind of a nod, I think, to the accepted test, because he does have his hair down. And he's hanging out with Alana and her warders and Alana's family. It appears all of this is very confusing, because I don't think they explain the bond situation very well at all. But he's not yet bonded to Alana, as I understand it. He's just hanging with them. Yeah. And he thinks they're hanging with him because they're afraid he might do what Stepan did and kill himself.
Right.
But Alana essentially tells him, we're not worried about that, because the way you lost the bond was not the same way Stepan did. And because of that, you're not at risk for depression and suicide. But we're still interested in what you're going to do now that you don't have Moraine to hang with and to help. And he has individual discussions with Alana, Maxim, and Yvonne. I now know their names. So I guess in that sense, spending this much time with them has led to me remembering who each of them are. And in their different ways, they're trying to help him overcome Moraine, because like, just stuck on Moraine and the way Moraine treated him and losing Moraine. And he's just hung up on this breakup. And so I like the idea that each of them have their own way of approaching this. And I thought they did a good job showing that. And then, but ultimately it turns out, at least in my view, my interpretation is what they're really doing is trying to use Lan to get info on Moraine and what Moraine's doing. Because at one point we see Maxim essentially breaking into Lan's room, looking through his stuff, finding the poem he took from Moraine, which she hasn't acknowledged, and he hasn't acknowledged since he took that poem. And then presumably showing it to Alana, and then they show it to Ivan, and Ivan was nice enough to read it to us all, which I thought was in-world really dumb. Because clearly Alana and Maxim had already read it and talked about it. Right. And so then it was only for the audience's benefit that he then read the poem to us. And I was like, well, okay, I guess it was important for us to know that, but it just seems so stupid. Because they would have stopped and be like, we know, we read it. We're there already.
Well, it's also kind of silly for a warder to read it. It would have made more sense.
Yeah, and
an Aes Sedai to read it.
Yeah.
It's just like, why is he delivering this line?
Well, and I think Maxim's the one that says something to Ivan like it's referring to Lanfear. Uh-huh. And I'm like, the warder is the one that knows about the Forsaken?
Why are the warders getting so much play right now? Like,
I don't know. It's ridiculous to me. I mean, these people have had more screen time than Matt and Perrin. Certainly Matt. And it's closing. Perrin's close. And I don't get it. Alana does have a big role to play later on in the books. Mm-hmm. So her I get. Her warders get an inordinate amount of time, in my opinion, in this show. And I hated everything about this storyline. Except the one small thing I liked, before I'll turn it over to you, was I did like that ultimately they showed this was all just a big setup for them to figure out what Moraine's doing. That they were playing Lan the whole time. Yeah. So I liked that small part of it. But do we have to spend a quarter of this episode with these people? Because I just don't care about them. And they're not interesting. And can we stop talking about the bond? What is the fixation on the warder bond in this show? It's weird to me that they've spent so much time on this. I assume it's going to pay off, I hope. At this point, though, I'm a little concerned that it's not going to pay off, and we're wasting time with these characters when we should be spending more time with Matt and with Perrin. And I'll even throw in Egwene, because we haven't talked about her. We'll get to her. But she also seems to not be getting a whole lot of play. I think that'll change here in the next coming episodes. But anyway, I'm going on now because I really didn't like this storyline. But so I'll stop for the moment and let you tell us what you thought of this storyline.
I agree. I thought the storyline was just filler and I don't understand what filler other than the Moraine kind of setup. And then I do think they wanted to acknowledge like why Lan's so hesitant to go to the tower and bond with Nynaeve, because that would be like the obvious solution, right? Because they like love us anyways, and he loves us, and so I think they probably did that just to kind of check that box of like that's the reason why he's not rushing to go back to her. And so I guess for those like 2 points it makes sense, but I agree, it was too long. Like I don't care how much water it takes to make bread in their little village. Like I don't need that. I don't need like a whole scene of them meditating and stuff. And so I don't know. It was too much time for them. I agree 100%.
The only reason I liked the meditation was because it ultimately was part of the setup to allow Maxim to search his stuff. And
it was kind of funny. Like, there was a little humor that you saw.
There was,
between warders. So, I mean, there was some good dialogue and stuff. But it just, it
dragged.
was just too long. It was
It was basically the same conversation
they could have combined the Nynaeve conversation into that section, and it would have been interesting to me. Because I feel like Lan would open up more to fellow warders versus an Aes Sedai to begin with. And so it would feel more natural for him to just have that conversation with Yvonne or Maximus.
I think it's Maxim.
Maxim?
I don't think it's Maximum.
Maximus?
See, I claim that I knew their names now, but now you got me questioning whether I actually know their names.
Ivan? I don't know. I like the actors, but at the same time, I'm like, I still don't really need like all of them. And plus, since they like train with Nynaeve, it would have made. Anyways, I could go on more about this. Like,
well, and this whole thing implies that Lan can't understand the poem, can't read it, or can't interpret it.
He just knows it's important. It's probably dire.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, especially if the implication is he can't read. I'm assuming this is in the old tongue, this poem. And if that's the case, that's ridiculous that they're implying that he can't read it, because in the first season he interprets for Nynaeve the old tongue. And so I think it's a disservice in a lot of ways to Lan's character. And it goes back to the problem, like, we talked about before the season came out. They're going to create storylines for Moraine and Lan because they're like the two most famous actors in the show, and you can't sideline them. And I gotta say, I'm pretty disappointed in both their storylines. I don't think the original content they've created to give them something to do has added much to the show. And I don't think that's going to improve. It could. We still got the latter half of the season. We'll see where it goes. But a good segue to Moraine, because I do think this was better than Lan's. I still think it's largely superfluous in my view. I wish a lot of this time would be spent with other characters that did more in the books. But Moraine, she's back in Carienne. And it turns out the woman who went up to Rand and was talking to Rand essentially about the game of houses in the third episode, I believe it was the third episode, turns out that is Moraine's older sister. And so Moraine is...
sister.
Huh?
Younger sister.
No, she's the older. Moraine's the younger. Wait, are you right? No, you're right. You're right. I got it. My bad. I'm trying to remember the age thing.
Did I
I flipped the age thing.
Misinterpret that?
You're right. I stand corrected. You're right. Because I was getting the age thing, and the whole point is to show that Aes Sedai age slower than others.
Right.
That's the whole gist of it. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. And so the whole thing is she looks like she's 20, 30, 40 years older than Moraine.
Right.
And but she's been running the household, and the household is a political pariah because of what I think their father, uncle, grandfather, I forget exactly who it was, but there's a whole backstory from the books, which I don't think you've gotten to yet, I don't believe.
I don't think so.
What happened. So we won't go into it, but their father, grandfather, I don't know if do you remember exactly who he was relative to them? Their relation did something that led to their house being labeled basically a political pariah. And so that's why in the first season, Moraine tells the White Cloaks that she is a noblewoman from a damaged house, broken house, fallen house, something like that. And when we see her younger sister, she's in kind of a rundown villa, in presumably Carienne, because that's where she met Rand. And ultimately, it turns out she's very politically savvy, though, Moraine's younger sister. And she has manipulated things so that, as we alluded to, her son, Moraine's nephew, is now betrothed to the Queen of Carienne. And she actually has a conversation with Moraine where it says, I don't care at your back, don't screw this up. You had your own role and your own responsibilities and duties. You ran off to be an Aes Sedai, that's great. I was stuck here trying to pick up the pieces, deal with the ruin that was left to us of our family and our house. I've done that. And you will not screw this up, so step carefully. It also turns out apparently she has bought Moraine's eyes and ears in Carienne. Because there's a scene of Moraine, quote-unquote, keeping a low profile by going to the foregate dressed like a noblewoman for everybody to see, standing right in front of the ruin of the inn that Rand burned down, and then questioning various people about the red-haired boy that was staying there and then working at the sanatorium, and whatnot. And everybody is basically rebuffing her and not giving her the answer she wants. And it turns out because her younger sister directed them not to help her. And so she basically coerces Moraine into begging for her help and allowing these other individuals to give her the information she needs. Moraine uses this. Turns out she's manipulated everything to get Logain there. Interesting. Which presumably was by order of Swan. Because I don't think Moraine, being in exile, had any pull, direct pull anyway, in the White Tower. But essentially she wants Logain to train Rand. And Logain basically tells her, yeah, he doesn't want anything to do with me. And she says, well, I'll tell you what. If you train him, convince him to allow you to train him, I'll give you a dagger and you can kill yourself. And, it'll be a fair trade. And so Logain seems to be okay with this. And then ultimately, at the end of the episode, Moraine's story segues with Moraine and Lanfear. Before we get to that, we'll wrap that into the Lanfear Selene storyline. So before we get to that, what were your thoughts on everything leading up to that? Are you liking Moraine, her storyline, what she's doing, what's happening, all that jazz?
Yeah, so I didn't hate this part of her storyline, because you kind of got to peel the curtain back a little bit and see a little bit more of Moraine's like history and kind of what her family went through and how her sister reacts to her now. I thought their dynamic was very interesting, and I kind of loved it. How it was at first, Moraine comes in and just thinks she's like the badass bitch that everyone listens to because she's basically Aes Sedai and don't have time for anybody, not even family. And then it quickly, like, tables churn. And you realize that, her younger sister has been, basically keeping the family together and has all of her eyes and ears throughout the city and knows exactly what Moraine's been doing. And it's like, you're going to have tea with me? And I'll tell you what you need, but only if you have tea with me.
Yeah, and like as she holds up the teacup and the...
Yeah. I loved that scene. I thought it was so great because it just kind of left Moraine like speechless, which I thought was interesting. And it almost makes you wonder, like, is she speechless just because she was like confronted and told what to do, and kind of it just kind of reinforces like her lack of power, kind of hinting towards her lack of like the one power too, or was there maybe like a little bit of pride in there too for her family of how her sister has like risen up and risen their house a little bit more and stuff like that. So I thought I actually enjoyed it. I didn't mind it.
I did. I liked the sister. She was great. And that actress is really good. I've seen her other things. I don't know her name,
great. Yeah,
but she's really good.
Yeah, and other things too. She's great.
It's just one of those things, again, too much time to the storyline, when I think it could be better allocated to other storylines. But I say that, again, as a book reader. I mean, I think for non-book readers, this is probably really interesting stuff. And there is, even in the books, there is a really interesting backstory to Moraine. It's just, in many ways, tangential to what's actually happening in the main series of plot lines. And so it's kind of put on the back burner in a lot of respects. And so we'll see, because I like as we talked about earlier, I think this is all leading to the Barthanes party, which is a really cool sequence in the books. So in that sense, I think this is going to have a really interesting payoff, coupled with what happens at the end of this episode that we'll talk about, because I imagine these are both going to come together and lead to a really cool sequence. So in that sense, in particular, I'm inclined to think this is a good addition. The way that they're getting to that scene, I think, and I think it works the way that they're going. I will say,
for the show, it's a good addition.
Yes. Yeah. And so when I was complaining about the original content made for Lan and how it's not a good addition, now I think this aspect of Moraine's story is a good addition. I didn't really, as we talked about in the previous episodes, we didn't really like the dynamic they created between Moraine and Lan. I still don't like it. But this part of Moraine's storyline, assuming the end game is where I anticipate it's going, I think it is a good way to get there under the circumstances. I will say I'm a little less... everything else that Moraine did in this episode seemed somewhat convoluted and contrived to me. And she became basically a Deus Ex Machina device at the end of this, as we'll get to. What do you think about the stuff with Logain? And that she's somehow manipulated all these events to get him to Carienne, which means she knew Rand was there somehow. So clearly she's been tailing Rand in some way. But it's one of those, it's very similar to me, the Leandrin plan with Min and Matt. So many seemingly random events would have had to occur for this to have worked out. I mean, he would have had to get a job at the sanatorium. He would have had to work his way up somehow, or beat the crap out of an orderly, and then trusted Logain enough to learn from him or whatever. So I don't know. Do you have any views on that? Did it work for you? Is it working for you? That aspect of Moraine and Loghain's relationship?
It's pretty far-fetched. It leans on a lot of ifs. If you'll do this, if you'll make it happen. But, I mean, I guess the only way I can justify it in my brain is kind of going back to the books about how Rand's always, like, talking about how Moraine's trying to, like, puppet him with strings, and, like, the White Tower is always trying to get him to do what they want. And so that's, like, the only thing is that I could think of is that, like, he's just slowly being fed to be, like, driven in a direction by the Aes Sedai to do what they want. So that's the way I'm justifying it in my brain.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that. That's actually really interesting and could have great payoffs. Because that's so much of, a underlying issue with Rand and Moraine and Rand and the Aes Sedai is he's always suspicious of them. As many people are in the books. The dancing on the strings of the White Tower.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, especially if he finds out at some point that Moraine has done all this. Which he might in the next episode, given the way this episode ends.
Right. Like, how did you know I was in this cabin? And you magically showed up and saved me from...
So that was interesting. The other interesting thing is she doesn't say it, but as I mentioned, I assume this is by order of the Amyrlin. I assume the Amyrlin's the only one with the authority to move him somewhere. Which, I can't remember, where does Swan's storyline end? This is going to go in the 4th book, in The Shadow Rising. Something happens. I'm trying to be very innocuous in case this hasn't happened yet for you in the books. So I can't remember exactly where it happens, in which book. It's not in the first 3.
Where she gets taken, basically kicked out of the tower and stilled?
Yes. Okay. So you've gotten to the coup. So that's book 4.
Book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So spoilers for book 4. Sorry, everyone. Quick spoilers for book 4. Yeah. So Swan gets deposed and Elaida takes over. Tangentially, by the way, I saw on Twitter of Time, I think it was, that apparently there are reports that Elida's been cast for season 3, and it's the actress that plays the UN Secretary General in The Expanse. So that could be really good. I don't think you've seen The Expanse. Really good show, by the way. Definitely recommend The Expanse. So Elaida is coming. And I think, assuming that Swan is the one that ordered Loghain moved, I think they're laying all these different pathways to increase suspicion on the Amyrlin, ultimately leading to her deposition, to the coup. And doing so in a really interesting and good way. And I think this is assuming this is where they're going, I think this is what they're doing is because it looks like from the trailer too, Swan is coming to Carienne, because she has in the trailer the meeting with Rand,
Right.
seemingly in Carienne too. And so I think these are all really good ways to lay the groundwork to explain why and to justify why there would be Aes Sedai that would depose Swan. And then they even hint at it again with Liandrin, where Liandrin threatens Liane. My goal is before the end of the season to figure out how to pronounce her name correctly, because I can never pronounce her name correctly. But essentially telling her, if the Amyrlin falls, you fall with her. You're tethered to her political success. And so I think they're doing a good job laying the groundwork for that. And I think this is a really interesting way to do it, since obviously this is all made out of whole cloth. This was none of this was in the books.
I actually like it this way better, though, because in the books it's kind of vague. It's just more like she just never really talks about anything that's happening with, Rand and stuff, and they just kind of grow suspicious. At least that's how I interpreted it, is that they were kind of just like...
You mean involving the coup, you mean? You're talking about the Amyrlin? Okay.
Yeah, it just seemed kind of sudden and out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all of a sudden, just like, you know what? We're going to kick the Amyrlin out today. Because I'm suspicious of your actions.
And I want power. I want to be Amyrlin.
That's just kind of what it felt like, versus having, like, solid reasons to really kick her out. So. Which
I think is a good segue, because I agree with you on that account. Mm-hmm. And I also think this leads to Liandrin, because I think what they've done generally with Liandrin this season, in the same way, is done better in the show so far than in the books. In explaining why and giving a plausible reason why Nynaeve in particular, but not even Egwene, would trust Leandrin enough when she tells them their friends are in danger.
Right.
And so that's essentially where we get to in this particular. So the White Tower storyline is this. Another thing I liked about this was they're actually showing the consequences to Nynaeve from the accepted test, and she's in a state of depression. She can't sleep. She's largely been alienated from Egwene and others. She goes to the warder pit, and there's a bunch of warders practicing there looking for presumably Maxim and Ivan, who are obviously not there. They're with Alana in Alana's hometown. And I, for one, am glad they're not there because I don't need more scenes with them, as I was moaning about earlier in this video. But she sees this other warder, this warder in training, a wit. And he apparently at least so they don't show anything about the Aes Sedai being concerned about someone coming back after seemingly the test fails. But the word has gotten around the tower that Nynaeve was able to reemerge from the trials, and I think he even says like she channeled in the arches, which no one's done or whatever. So once again, just in a different way, telling the audience Nynaeve is unique, special, and no one has even gotten close to her level in 1,000 years. But this warder, he's trying to get in there and become her warder down the road. Yeah, he is. Yeah, very, very, very for her. Others, talking about the show, call him the thirsty warder. He's also, he's just gotten done training with a sword or something. He's got no shirt on, and he's leaned on the sword talking to Nynaeve. And Nynaeve doesn't want anything to do with this guy.
Just like...
Yeah, she has, and so it gives him this weird look, and then she sees Leandrin across the warder pit, like looking at some kind of correspondence. And then Nynaeve goes off. It turns out she goes down to the arches, and she sits by one of the arches, looking at the third arch, in a very morose way. She's very contemplative. Leandrin's going to come and talk to her, but before that, that's when we get to the encounter between Leandrin and Liane, and I gotta say, the outfit Liane is wearing is amazing. Did you like that dress? That was a wild dress that she had on. I don't even know how to describe it. It was really unique,
earrings, though. Like I love the earrings that they had on her, and the outfit. Oh yes, the outfits were hitting in this episode. Yeah,
they were really cool. But she's doing stuff. She's like reading correspondence, writing correspondence, and we find out the Amyrlin hasn't been in the White Tower for a while. And that when the Amyrlin is away, the Aes Sedai will play, but Liane or Leanne is in charge, and she speaks on behalf of the Amyrlin as if she were the Amyrlin. And Leandrin bursts into her office and is very upset because she's getting word that there are soldiers, there's an army or something in the West, and it's like there's war that's brewing, there are people disappearing. And she demands to know if the White Tower is doing anything about it. And Liane just kind of blows her off. Says, we're dealing with it. That should be enough. That should satisfy you. And that's when we get the line from Leandrin, be careful, because if the Amyrlin falls, you fall. And then Leandrin then goes down and hangs out with Nynaeve and has a very tender moment with Nynaeve, and where they commiserate over their experiences. Leandrin's as an Aes Sedai, Nynaeve in the context of the accepted test. And I think it's a very sweet moment between the two of them. And really humanized Leandrin. And Leandrin, I forget the exact words she says. I don't know if you recall, but essentially saying, to survive in this world as an Aes Sedai, you have to find one thing that you'll fight for. Otherwise, you'll go crazy or you'll go mad and won't be able to handle it. And so, very sweet moment. But at the end of this moment is when she tells Nynaeve, hey, by the way, I received word of this mysterious force in the West. White Tower doesn't seem to do anything about it. Oh, and by the way, the reports say that they have captured a blacksmith from the Two Rivers. It's very specific. And an ogier. And this leads Nynaeve to don all of her traveling gear and garb, burst into a discussion between Egwene and Elaine. They are drinking again. So Elaine is still perfecting her brew or her wine or whatever she makes. And that was a really fun little brief conversation they had, because I think, didn't Egwene say something like, would you ever give up your power and Elaine thinks about it for a second and says, no. Which I loved. And then Nynaeve bursts in and is like, I need to talk to Egwene. And Elaine says, this is my room. And Nynaeve doesn't say anything, just stares at her. And Elaine finally says, okay, I think I need to go check on someone else or something. And she leaves. And that's when Nynaeve tells Egwene, and Egwene says, the only reason I'm here is to learn to get powerful to protect my friends because I am still guilt-ridden over what happened to Rand. Which I'm really looking forward to when they actually run back into Rand, because I think that's going to be really interesting. Reunion between them all.
Yeah.
Anyway, they decide to go. They take the path that Nynaeve found after following Leandrin. Elaine follows them and tells them, yeah, I am following you. And then out of the shadows emerges Leandrin and her cheekbones and her stoic jaw and her piercing blue eyes, and tells Elaine that she's a complication and apologizes to Nynaeve for what she has to do and channels, and then blows all of the girls against the stone wall, knocking them all out. And then she takes like a couple extra steps and stares with those icy blue daggers for eyes. And stern jaw. And really, really high cheekbones. And that's it. There you go. See you next episode.
Scene.
So, what'd you think? You love Leandrin. You must have loved those scenes.
I continue to love Leandrin. I think she's so great. Just love her. They're doing a great job with that character out of everyone. like she's fantastic. I think I loved her. I thought it was interesting how they decided to interpret that scene where Leandrin actually knocks them out, and then that's how they're gonna go through the ways, presumably. Versus they follow Leandrin willingly through the ways, and then end up, where they are.
Which do you like that idea? Assuming that's what's going to happen, is that they are knocked out the entire time and taken through the way, as opposed to falling to willing. What do you think about that? That change?
I think it's a missed opportunity. I think there could have been some really interesting dialogue between Leandrin and the three of them. Like, you've seen it with her and Nynaeve. I think it would have been interesting to see how it would have evolved with Egwene and Elaine there, because Elaine's kind of like the voice of, like, reason. Of, like, why are you following this crazy bitch? Like, she probably would have been like, why are we doing this?
She almost pushed me off the tower last episode.
Yeah. Like, and maybe that's why they decided to kind of do this. And probably it's just an easier way to continue the storyline, maybe, because I think it would have been more impactful how the books do, where they show up and then it's shown and they see Leandrin basically betraying them real time, versus in this scene we'll even see if they know, like, I mean, of course they'll know, like, Leandrin obviously betrayed them, but they won't get that, like, kind of in-person betrayal. So I think it's a bummer. I think it's a bummer, but I also love Leandrin right now, so it just may be me. But I don't know. Do you like how they did that?
No,
okay,
I hate
cool.
it.
Great.
I hate it. And
great.
Did you see the clip they released today? I texted it to you.
Yes.
It's a promo clip. So you saw that?
Promo clip.
And so clearly they are going to be knocked out, because they have that quick shot
They're
of the
still
three of them
knocked
knocked
out,
out and like tied up. I hate it. And I think it's really a disappointment after everything they've done that I think is actually done better in the series to set up Leandrin in this role of the betrayer. Yeah. As I was mentioning earlier, I really do think I much prefer how much time they've given to Leandrin and the way that they've allocated and the story that they've built around it. It seems much more believable to me Nynaeve would trust her enough to convince Egwene to go and protect their friends or rescue their friends, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so that's where so that's why I was so disappointed when she just knocks them all out. It just immediately does the heel turn. Yeah. And especially when she could easily, first of all, why does she care about Elaine being there? She takes Elaine, clearly from the clip, and we see from the trailers, she takes Elaine anyway. So why does she have to knock them all out? And even if the concern is like Egwene would be like, oh, I'm not going anywhere with her, how easy would it have been to say, I'm sorry we had that kind of difficult confrontation or conversation. But we were both very distraught. We both thought we lost someone we cared about. Emotions were high. Let bygones be bygones. So, I mean, there are ways to still have them go with her and have the betrayal as soon as they walk out and see all the Shan-Chan.
Sure, yeah.
Then, because obviously now they know that she's evil.
Right.
And so, yeah, I hate it. I think it undermines a lot of the setup that they did in the first 4 episodes here. And it loses that impact. Because I think my first time reading the books, when they emerged in the Shan-Chan, I was like, oh, shit. Oh, my gosh. I mean, I knew Leandra was evil, but I didn't know the extent of her depravity and duplicity. And I think, I just don't know why they made that change. Maybe we'll find out more. Maybe there'll be a reason why. But given how close they made Nynaeve and Leandrin, especially after that moment they had in the chamber in the arches, where they really seemed to connect with one another over their pain, their history, and their trauma, I could easily see Nynaeve convincing both Egwene and Elaine to trust her. If not, don't trust her, trust me, and I trust her.
Yeah.
And then ultimately they get there. But yeah, so I agree with you. I thought that really undermined everything they've set up with Leandrin. But you know, she's been an all-star. I mean, she's been a real standout. That actress this season, and they've done a lot of good job. They've done a really good job, I think, writing her character as well. So they've given her a lot of great material to work with. I thought it was a little on the nose though when she threatened Liane. I thought that was a little on the nose there. And is that how they talk to the keeper of the Chronicles? And I was like, wow. It goes back to my decorum issue.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I feel like
it seems a little out of place.
Well, I feel like Leandrin's always been kind of blunt and like
she hasn't killed a
doesn't
novice
give a shit
apparently.
what people think. Yeah, like even in the first season when they're in the the scenes where they're in the court in front of the Oberlin, she's pretty blunt and to the point with what she
True,
says.
you're right. Yeah.
So if there's no one around, and it's just her and Leanne or Leon. I imagine she don't give a shit. She's probably just like, if the Oberlin falls, so will you. I can see that.
It was also weird to me. I don't know what it'll be. I hope they have a payoff for that, because I don't understand like what that's supposed to lead to. Why send more people? Unless she was trying to get like the keeper to allow her to go and to take someone with her, and so it would be a way to get Nynaeve and Egwene there, but with the imprimatur of the Oberlin.
Sure.
I don't know. I just thought it felt out of place and weird to me. Unless it was also just a device to try and get the audience to think she actually does care about Nynaeve's friends and stuff or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was so those are the two big quibbles I had with the way they did the storyline. The third one would be just not enough time with Egwene and Elaine. Elaine has done very little, has had little screen time since we met her in the second episode, which is a disappointment to me because I still think so far, the little they've given her to do, I think she's done a great job being Elaine and bringing her to life. And poor Egwene, but I assume Egwene's going to get a lot of screen time in the second half of this season. So I'll reserve judgment on that. And I still don't we'll see how they do this, but this goes back to my Matt and Min complaint. Min should be with them, with Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve. And Matt should be with Tom or something. Because Min was like Egwene's only connection to her previous life in the latter half of the Great Hunt until Nynaeve and Elaine show back up. And now she's not gonna have that, presumably. I don't have any conception of how they could actually bring that together. But anyway, any other thoughts, reactions to the White Tower storyline?
I did like the little touch of Nynaeve's accepted outfit with the all the colors to represent all the different Ajas. I thought that was cool.
And Egwene was oogling her accepted ring.
Yeah.
Jealousy coming back again for Egwene. Very, very jealous. But okay, let's get to your favorite storyline.
Okay.
The Bloody Woman. The Bloody Woman. Yeah, and that's how the episode opened with Ashamael walking somewhere in a cave or in a canyon or something. Presumably in Carian. And presumably the thing that breaks is the moon dial that was referenced in the first episode. But he channels, unleashes the woman from the ring. She's all covered in blood. So it's Carrie as if she were the girl in the ring. And doesn't lift her head. She slowly gets up from a crouch, from like her Terminator crouch. But her head is still down so that her hair hangs over her face, so you can't tell who it is. And extends one hand that Ashamael grabs. And Ashamael is intoning the poem, or the prophecy or whatever.
Prophecy.
Yeah. And ultimately, this is Selene. So it's Lanfear, one of the Forsaken. Turns out to be Selene. Book readers all gasped in shock. But before we get to the big reveal, we have Selene and Rand staying outside the burned down inn. Rand is trying to clean up, kind of. He's like sweeping a couple, pieces of burnt wood or whatever. And Selene basically tells him, let's get away. Want to get away? I want to get away. I want to go to Kingslayer's Dagger. Went there all the time as a kid. And I'd like you to come with me. And he's reticent at first. He's still, I think, afraid that he'll kill her because he couldn't control his powers and he burned down the inn. But ultimately, she convinces him. And so then that's where we then get the shot of them looking over a cliff at a very picturesque kind of valley. And she tells him, you got to seize power. This is the clip we got before the show debuted, one of the promo clips that we talked about in one of our podcast episodes. Yep. And then the next we see them, it's nighttime. They're camping. There's a cabin like 20 paces away, but they want to sleep under the stars. They're like, oh, I just remembered. I forgot Elias and Perrin. We'll have to come back to that. How could I have forgotten the Perrin storyline that was on screen for 5 minutes? But we'll get back to it. But anyway, they want to be like Elias. They want to sleep under the stars, and so they're sleeping together next to a campfire that's just embers. And Rand senses something. He wakes up and he senses something, and he stands up and he walks toward the cabin. And now behind him, out of the shadows, teleports a Murdral, and they then battle each other for about a minute. Rand is disarmed very quickly, because he has his Heronmark blade, but he doesn't know how to use it. Apparently his training with the old man in the sanitarium didn't really help at all.
Didn't go well.
Yeah. And so then Selene wakes up. Oh, Selene was the one that warned him about the Murdral. She's like, Rand! And that's when he turned around and started fighting it. And so ultimately Rand channels and burns the Murdral, which is kind of a really weird, I thought, VFX shot, the way that the Murdral burned and then like collapsed in on itself or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
And then essentially Rand tells Selene that he can channel. Selene is somewhat taken aback and aghast. And
At first.
And so she asks him, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me you could channel? And he said, oh, I didn't. I want to be myself and have someone know me for myself and not think of me as a monster. And I'm a monster. And I'm afraid I'm going to hurt the ones I love, which she then interprets as, oh, you love me. And that's where this I did like. She turns immediately into basically Lanfear.
Yeah.
And she's all about him now because she thinks he has now declared his love for her. And she hustles him into the cabin, ties him to the bed, and yeah, as she's riding him, she starts to channel, which he senses something going on.
She's riding him.
What?
Sorry.
How would you explain? How would you describe it?
No, I mean that's
Writhing on him? I don't know. I don't know how you describe it.
It's just funny.
Yeah, very PG though. Very PG. This is a PG scene, kind of. It's getting weird. It's a little weird.
It's like, what's going on?
Yeah. So she's channeling or something, and she then leans down next to his ear and says, "Oh, Rand, I gotta let you know, I'm a monster too." And that's when she's still channeling. He's like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" And before she can do whatever she's supposed to do or she's planning to do, sword through the chest. Moraine's there, hand on head, pulls head back, puts dagger across throat, and then throws body on floor. Rand is understandably confused. I'm sure on many levels. But Moraine is telling him as she's cutting his bonds off the bed, we got to get out of here. Like, this is bad news. She's Lanfear. This is the shot from the trailer where he then grabs her by the throat and I think he starts channeling while he's holding her against a wall. He's very unhappy. So if he didn't love Selene, certainly had affection for her. But she tells him, that's Lanfear. I can't lie to you. She can. And that's enough for Rand to be like, okay, that must be Lanfear. Gotta grab my sword. Let's get out of here. And so Moraine also says, I can't kill her. Mm-hmm. And so as they run out, the camera pans down to the open eyes and the bleeding corpse of Selene. Mm-hmm. And then you see like black or brown flecks go through her eyes towards her iris, and then she blinks, cut to black, roll credits, end of the episode. Mm-hmm. And in mixed within there was like a cutting between the beginning of the episode with a Shamael Lanfear and then Rand and Selene at the end of the episode.
Yes.
Thereby telling the audience, yes, this is Lanfear. Don't want any ambiguity. She is Lanfear. So, there you go. Your favorite storyline from the episode. Mm-hmm. Tell us why.
I think I just love the confirmation that it's Lanfear. I like her kind of psychotic mind flipping that's going on in her brain as she, after Rand does the one power, and then she's like, oh my god, but then, the moment he says, I love you, it's just like, I just think she just personifies Lanfear so well. Like, the actress just does it so phenomenally on just showing the emotion, and just you can almost see, like, how her brain is, like, working in the moment as she's, like, taking everything in and thinking of what goes next and stuff. And I just think she just personifies Lanfear perfectly. And, I mean, there's the cheesy moment with the Murderl, which you're kind of like, why did he show up? And it's almost like, did Lanfear make him show up just so that he would do the one power in front of her, and then they kind of have this moment and kind of force this, which I think was what she would do.
I think absolutely. She set this whole thing up. And this is actually, I think, an echo from The Great Hunt, because in the Mirror Worlds, she's the one that brings the Grom to like attack her, so that Rand then saves her. And so I think that's what this is, the show version of that. Going back to, unfortunately for you, I think more evidence there's not going to be Mirror Worlds, because I think this is the show's version of that scene. So I'm in complete agreement with you that she set this whole thing up to get him to channel. Did you like Moraine showing up and disabling her, knocking her? I don't know, since she can't kill her, I don't know what you would call it.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say.
Did you like that?
It was expected. It wasn't. It was predictable. In my opinion, it was predictable.
Okay.
Just based off of how it was being set up with her Moraine's sister saying, "I can tell you where he is," and then, this big moment's about to happen, and then, of course, what happens? Moraine shows up and saves the day, basically.
Yeah, I am a little ambivalent on Moraine. This is my key feeling after all the storylines of this episode, ambivalence. Because there's aspects I liked, aspects I thought didn't work very well. Mm-hmm. And one of the big ones was I didn't think it made sense for Moraine. First of all, where are they outside of Carian? It can't be that far.
Presumably up on a cliff that overlooks the city or something.
Yeah. I assume her sister did tell her, oh, he went with this innkeeper to this cabin. How would she know that? I mean, I guess there are eyes and ears that are literally watching them wander away. I don't know. They look like they're in a secluded area. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I'll allow it.
Suspend belief.
I'll allow that, I suppose.
Sure.
But it's also one of those things, too. She's like, oh, she just so happened to show up at that perfect time to stab her and then cut her throat, and then it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. It just all seemed very rushed to me in the end here. And so I didn't, somewhat contrived and convoluted. And then Rand immediately trusting Moraine again. Moraine shows up after 5 months and just seemingly brutally murders the person that Rand kind of declared his love for. Mm-hmm. And I know the implication is Moraine is can only tell the truth. And so that's presumably what leads him to trust her. But then again, they've set up all this stuff like, well, the truth isn't always what you think it is, that an Aes Sedai tells you. So Rand immediately picking all of his crap up and leaving. I guess in the context of it all, it can make sense, but it still seemed all a little rushed to me.
Yeah.
I did like her transition, and this is because the actress is playing the character incredibly well. And like all aspects of Selene / Lanfear. So I loved everything the actress brought to the episode. It just all felt very rushed to me. And I'm not certain I'm still trying to figure out if I like the immortality element of the Forsaken. That apparently you can't. Clearly what they're going to do is the only way to get rid of them is balefire. So, which is also kind of weird to me. That would ultimately then kind of be weird to me in a sense, as it was in the books. Like you have this ultimate weave that can just obliterate these people, just use it all the time, which the books end up doing quite frequently. You end up using balefire quite liberally in the books, and I assume that that's where this is going. Is that basically Moraine already knows it. She must not know it, otherwise I assume she would have used it on Lanfear while she's disabled and on the ground.
Yeah.
But I always liked the idea that the Forsaken were still human at the end of the day. Like, they have immortality in the sense that they don't die of old age. But they still suffered from the foibles and frailties of regular humans. And they did have abilities to protect themselves. They were like the most powerful channelers, allegedly, in the world. And so making them Terminators, I don't know if I'm on board with the decision yet. It's one of the things I'm going to reserve judgment and see how it ultimately plays out down the road. But that seems very strange to me. And also, wouldn't this have been a concern in the first season? I mean, if she knows that Forsaken are indestructible, I mean, she thought Shamiel was the Dark One. But you're going to tell me, like, so the Forsaken are indestructible, but the Dark One's not? I don't know. A lot of it doesn't really add up a whole lot. I think we're going to get more answers in the next episode. I assume Rand and Moraine are going to talk about this. I hope. There are some explanations that we get about everything that's happened here. But this is why I think it's going to be, if they do the party with Barthanes, it could be really interesting, because presumably Lanfear is going to be on a rampage now. And Moraine is going to be her number one target.
Yeah.
Because of this.
Seals peels.
And so I wonder if this is ultimately going to lead to the wedding and the reception, and Lanfear is just going to crash it and be after awesome. Rand and Moraine. Because the other thing people have been speculating, I heard, is that Moraine's younger sister is a dark friend, and that's another way that she knows where Lanfear and Rand are, because she's like plugged into Lanfear's schemes in Cardigan.
I could see that.
It could be, yeah.
That would be interesting.
So, yeah. So it was interesting. Yeah, it was an interesting storyline. But as always, acting top notch. So, any final thoughts on that storyline?
No, other than that, I just enjoyed it.
It
was fun.
Well, and before we conclude, let's quickly talk about the storyline I did forget. The Elias and Perrin.
It was forgettable.
Yeah. So Elias saved Perrin, and so it's just one or two scenes, or one long extended scene of the two of them. Elias is kind of telling him about what it means to be a wolf brother, and it turns out Elias was actually in the first season. We just didn't see him, because he says that he's been following Perrin since the first season, and Perrin's inadvertently been sending him and the other wolves visions, and they've been following them, and it was actually Elias and the wolves. Elias was essentially directing the wolves to attack the White Cloaks in the first season to free Perrin. But then ultimately we find out that the visions Perrin's been having, those are actually images sent to him by wolves that the wolves have seen. And so ultimately we find out the wolf sitting next to Perrin that Perrin followed, that's Hopper. A big character from the books. So book fans rejoice. Hopper is there. And essentially the sequence ends with them eating raw meat over fire. I think Elias is eating raw meat. Perrin's trying to cook his meat.
Perrin's cooking his, yeah.
And Elias is still not blinking.
Oh my God. So I watched that entire scene to see if he would blink. He literally did not blink the entire scene. And I'm not counting...
Do wolves not blink? Is that like a wolf trait or something? I don't get it.
No, wolves have to blink. Like, I'm convinced it's the contacts. But I'm not counting... I'm not counting when he like looks down at his food and stuff. I'm not counting that. I'm talking like
it's a fake blink, doesn't count.
Talking and he's like looking at Perrin. He does not blink. I'm convinced it's the context.
I will say this is one of my favorite parts of the episode. And so this is why, because they're finally giving Elias a character to play and something to do. And they're explaining more about what it means to be a wolf brother. And so it's one of those things where I'm just like, give more time to this. Let this scene breathe a little and not revisit Alana and her warders.
Yeah, we could have passed on that for sure.
The only thing I hated about this was that reference, which I thought was really dumb. That Elias is like, oh no, I've been following you with my pack since he didn't say it's season 1, but by implication statement he means by season 1. And he says the reason I didn't introduce myself was because we tend to stay away from women that can channel. They were away from Moraine for an entire month in the first season. And I think they don't say it. The implication is they wanted to stay away from Moraine, not Egwene.
Right.
And if it turns out, no, they also meant Egwene, she could barely light a campfire with the one power.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a cheap way to suggest, oh no, he's there. And so I did not like that. Why even bring that up? I don't know. I don't understand why they would bring that up.
It feels like
at this point. So I didn't. That was the one quibble I had. I hated that reference, and I hated that kind of what in my view is essentially a retcon. And it annoys me further. I'll get off my rant here in a moment. The other reason it annoys me and I hate it is because if that is true, he could have been with them in the Tinker's camp like he is in the books. And so I think the reason they didn't was because they didn't cast him. And so really they didn't have an actor to play him.
So. Yeah.
And so it's a production issue, not a story issue. And so that was the only thing. I liked everything else about that brief sequence with Elias and Perrin. I'm excited to see where it goes. The previews. Did you see the promo for next episode?
I'm sure I did, but I just don't really recall.
Perrin meets Avienda. Really looking forward to that.
Yes, I remember.
So I'm excited to see where Perrin's storyline.
I think doesn't she say like, "Are you ready to dance?" or something to Perrin?
Yeah, Perrin Ibarra.
Cool.
It looks like we get Dane Bornhold because there's a white cloak with like holding an axe, and he does the Keanu Reeves from The Matrix.
Yes,
hand signal.
Now I'm remembering. Yeah.
So I'm excited to see where the storyline's going. But that little, and I liked everything else in that short sequence. It was just that reference to season 1 of it that was so dumb. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Before we wrap up the video?
I agree with everything you said. I actually enjoyed this part because it gave you a little more in depth into like the actual wolfy abilities.
Wolfiness.
Hopper's such a good boy.
And he was hopping.
He was so cute.
Vision.
He was like,
it was very cute. Yeah.
It was adorable. I was like, now see, throw in a wolf, and it's adorable.
I was waiting for him to take off and soar because my recollection of the books, that's what he always wanted to fly.
Yes, he wanted
as a wolf,
to fly.
and he couldn't
and then
fly.
When he passes away, in the wolf dream, he's actually flying.
I think we'll get that. I think they'll follow that. I think Hopper will get killed somehow, and he'll encounter him in the wolf dream, and he will be flying, which will be really tearing to see.
Such a good boy.
Such a good boy. Some have said the best boy. Okay, let's get to it. Favorite thing, biggest criticism.
Favorite thing
for this episode.
I think my favorite thing is just continuing to be Leandrin. Like I just love every single scene she's in. It's just so great. So I think she continues to be my favorite.
I hear Gandalf in the background, by the way.
Yeah,
must be dinner time.
It's dinner time. And then I think my least favorite thing is probably the land order filler stuff that just didn't feel needed. Yeah.
So my favorite, probably, I'll go with the Shamail to be somewhat different. So I guess we're very. This is the episode where we're like the villain stuff.
It was a very kind of villainy setting the stage kind of moments. Like
I just think he's a captivating actor. I think if you had said Leandrin, I would have said Leandrin too. But to be different, I'll go with someone else. But it's just their acting is really good.
No, that was cool.
Yeah, I think I'll be different again because I would have said the land storyline, the Alana and the Warriors. I don't need them anymore in this show. For God's sake.
No, we can
or at least give Lance something else.
On that.
Yeah. But since I ranted about it, I'll go with the Elias comment about season 1.
Okay.
It's just like
That's fair.
ridiculous to me. So, rating for this episode.
I'm gonna give it, because I kind of viewed this one as very much a setting the stage transitional episode. Like, I didn't hate it, but it was very much setting the stage for what's to come, which gets me excited for things, so that's good. So I would probably give it a 6, though. I'm still gonna be like above average ish.
I have gone back and forth, but I'm going to give it a 5.5, 5.5.
Okay.
Because outside of, well, even the land storyline, I think it had this factor. But every storyline for me had a lot of high points and then a lot of low points. And so not a single one of them hit
100%.
perfectly or well
Yeah,
for me.
yeah.
There's always something that was like, oh, this is dragging it down for me. Yeah. So I thought about giving it a 5, but then there were other times where I'm like, no, I really do like this. The best parts of it outweigh the others, so I'll give it a 6. And I'll split the difference, 5.5. So, real briefly before we wrap up, since it's the midway point, thoughts so far on the first half of the season?
I still stand by this being better than the first season, for sure. I'm loving. I love the new characters that they're kind of introducing. I'm loving the characters that they're lifting, like Leandrin. And then obviously Selene would be like the new character highlight for me. But also Elaine. So I feel like they're doing some really interesting things. I love the world building that they're continuing to do. And I love the action and kind of where they're going. So I think it's still, in my eyes, lifting up from the first season, which is good. Still a lot of questions just on where it's all going and how different it will be from the books and how they'll translate it into a show, because obviously we're seeing a lot of changes and new storylines being created. But I'm hopeful, though. I'm still optimistic that it's going to be a good second half of the season and hopefully a good season ender. So that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I'm with you. Definitely better than the first season. I think the setup has so far been really good because I think they are ultimately leading to Falm, and so far I can see how they've set everything up, how that would logically make it to Falm. So I'm very excited for the second half of the season. I think it's going to be really action packed and really interesting. The only thing I would say is I still just don't like the Land of Moraine stuff. The original stories that they've created for them, they're just not working for me. And maybe they will once we see the end product of it by the end of the season. But that's, to me, really been dragging down a lot of these episodes. And it culminated in a lot of ways in the Land storyline, the Alana and the War storyline. It's just, I think they're allocating time poorly in a lot of ways. And Rand is finally kind of moving forward. For the first 3 episodes, we were talking about spinning his wheels. But I think now we know who Selene is. We're kind of moving forward. And he's hooked back up with Moraine. We can finally get him to actually do things meaningful in the storyline. So we'll see. But please, more time with Matt, more time with Perrin. I'm begging the showrunners and the creators.
They need some more time, for sure.
Yeah. But on a whole, very excited for the second half, which begins tomorrow night as of the time of this recording. So with that, Denny, where can viewers, listeners find our content if they would like to hear us talk about other aspects of Wheel Time and other aspects of pop culture?
We are at The Pop Docs on YouTube, Twitter, X-Twitter, Instagram. Instagram is at The Pop Docs Pod. And also, we record podcasts, and we upload them where you get podcasts. So that's where you can find us.
Excellent. And for those that have viewed or listened to this particular episode, I was going to say podcast episode, it's not a podcast episode, video, let us know in the comments what you thought about this episode, what you thought about our theories and our own reactions to the episode. Join the discourse. But for now, the Pop Docs Clinic is officially closed.
Toodles.